more efficient. Right there. Like that. See, I noticed the sides of my head seem to have these lumps, little lumps here and there, and they would kind of be in different places from week to week, different thicknesses, and this is one of the places where I say the Morgellons causes infection under the skin, swelling. This is when it would swell in this area and it would get lumpy. I get the intense, nonstop, year and a half long headache that I had years ago. And so I don't want to go into like the entire story because it's a long story about how I came across these strange, what people would think strange treatments that are actually helping. How I came to these conclusions. I didn't just like, well, hey, I know I'm gonna, use a lighter and a candle and then a torch. That's a good idea. No, it is a good idea, but I didn't come about it just because, oh, I'm crazy and I want to do something, radical, because that's not it at all. I'm very methodical. And it took years for me to become this comfortable with, the fire. I'm almost going to call it my own form of yoga. I mean, this would be true fire yoga, and it's not to do with hairs or anything. The hair just seems to be caught in the middle. It has to do with everything that's happening to us as a species right now with the Kimberly T. Rails, she's a witch that flies over everybody's cities all the time now. Yeah, it's with that and the nano and probably the 5G being an extension of HARP. If you've seen some of these videos, you can just like, I'm not going to put any links in because I'm too lazy for that, but you can just search any of these things that I might mention and they'll come up. There's these videos where they're moving, styrofoam balls or other things sometimes, but they're moving them with sound frequencies, from multiple locations in like an area and moving objects up and down with sound, and I've heard it, rudimentary explained about how silicon is grown into the ingots, which are sliced into wafers to make computer chips. And even the wafer, on a zoom in scale, is like a building basically, and there's all these levels in it, and the diodes, resistors, and whatnot that go into the integrated circuit chip are formed in those layers in that wafer by high-powered magnetic resonance. So to me that means they've got some high-powered magnetic emitters that are computer controlled, and they're so precise that they can literally, like, I don't know, it'd almost be like engraving it with magnetic waves or something, or I'm not exactly sure what a comparison would be on that, but they're printing it onto the silicon in just that layer of a very thin chip that it's actually, on a microscopic level, it's got all kinds of layers in it. Anyway, there's videos of that. There's, I don't know. When you think about that moving things in three-dimensional space with magnetic resonance, there's a ferrofluid. Look up ferrofluid and frequencies in ferrofluid. It creates all these, the black goo ferrofluid will take on the 3D shape, of a star or something, depending on the frequency of the energy being put to it. Cymatics, look up cymatics, and there's like this lycopodium, or basically looks like baby powder or salt or sand. And you put it on a surface and vibrate sound with it, and it will, vibrate the sand into the shape of the geometry of that tone. And they just happen to be, the platonic solids, I guess they are called. They're all geometric and they're all balanced, but in between those states there's disharmony and there's all kinds of other things going on, but they don't, even the other things don't look unnatural sometimes. It's weird. But it's interesting. I think it was the 520 degrees of a pentagon. If 520 hertz is played as the frequency in an audio tone to the sand will vibrate into the shape of a pentagon. Now that's just, it seems weird to me that it would be that precise, like 520 degrees of angles equals 520 hertz. Like the two things are like, decided at the same time or something. I don't know. That may seem strange. If you get what I'm saying, you get what I'm saying. Just this little bit of heating right here. I mean, I can kind of feel a spot, but whatever is under the skin has a low temperature point of flammability, or I guess it would be dissolution. I don't know. It vaporizes at a temperature lower than that which I can withstand the heat from, and it's like there's an endless supply. I could literally do this for hours if I can handle it without losing my mind or having to fall asleep and fall on a torch, right? Ow, don't want that. But this is what has moved. All those lumps, all the swelling, all the headache has, migrated it out of my head, and I actually felt pretty good recently. This thing here on my head, this lump here, which I didn't know what was, been there for decades. It was like I don't know, like a callus almost. Like I got a callus on my head, right? And as my health got worse, I noticed it became more pronounced. It had like line running to it that was kind of ridged a little bit, and that's when my eyebrows were really swollen and they would bleed, and my earlobe was bleeding constantly, and my, like I said, I had a headache for a year and a half straight. At that time, I began to notice that just ridiculously. I'm like, this is obvious. And even one time it just split open and bled spontaneously. So I started to figure whatever that is, and the associated swelling that kind of goes along certain lines to other areas I'm having these kind of issues with, was related. The two things are related. That's how somehow is related. And when I first started getting sick, I noticed like my facial hair did not grow properly. It was like coarse white hairs, and they'd grow at weird angles, and I did not seem right, and it came on really fast, right? It was not like, over 15, 20 years of time I slowly got gray hairs. No, it was like it stopped growing here and started growing curly, wiry white hairs, while my ears rang constantly, and I had a headache that never ended. To the point I'm like, are they using dew on me? What the fuck's going on? I have to close my motorcycle shop after all this shit, After fucking my 8 years in county jail for driving a car and living in Clark County, life on the installment plan. And I finally get out of trouble with all of that crap, and I get poisoned to death, and then I'm a little, perturbed about that, but what can you do? We're here to be tortured, apparently. So I figured I'd just take the preemptive move and torture myself, right? See, because I can stop when it starts to hurt. Trying to get that off my ear for a while. When I'm in the when they're using these, do weapons, whatever. When these airplanes are flying over for no particular reason, over and over and over again, which doesn't really mean the point I've been wanting to talk about. How much air travel is normal? It's been really quiet here tonight. I mean, I don't think there's any planes flying at all right now. But other nights, there's 4 jetliners from 4 directions, every minute for hours, while guys in little Cessna planes and, diesel-powered propeller planes fly around in circles, like they're having an air show all day and all night. And since the pandemic, the all day, all night has pretty much just been all day. The small planes toned down at night now, but they didn't used to a few years ago. There's a whole group of airplanes that are the twin turboprops, like Horizon Air or Alaska used to fly for their shuttles. Alaska Horizon Air. And they always take off in a different flight path than the other jets do, coming from PDX. They always seem to be making a big banking turn about the time they get to Vancouver. I've seen them like 2 at a time flying in giant circles, basically going around Vancouver and Portland, leaned at an angle, continuously. Motorcycle. Like, that's a bee. No, it's not a bee. Yeah, what the fuck? Kind of buzzed in my head. That's another Morgellons thing. A sound, resonates in your ear a little too much. Shit. Anyway, I lost my train of thought there. Oh, I do my 8 years in jail, life on the installment plan. I get healthy. I start a motorcycle shop. It's doing pretty good, even though I'm undercharging for all my work. And I like to fix motorcycles, not disappoint people that they can't afford to have their shit fixed. So, because that's just how I roll. Those who can do. Anyway, yeah. So, me being alive is an act of defiance right now. I figured, the mud baths, number one, using the methyl alcohol heat, but not at the same time as any fire because it's highly flammable. That alcohol will dissolve crystals, and this stuff coming out of my skin is, it's like crystalline hairs. Like literally, my hair would get, especially in my chin and my cheeks and my jawline, where it was turning super white and growing at weird angles and then not growing in any normal way like it had been just a year before. It would dissolve some of that off, and it would take the waxy feeling off of my skin where it wasn't growing, and the wiry coarseness of the hairs would diminish. And I happen to know that methyl alcohol will dissolve solid crystals, and aluminum, barium, strontium nanoparticles are crystals. They're tiny, tuned antenna crystals. And we've been breathing them for 20 or more years, and if you're on any type of doctor's prescription pills, you've been ingesting them for however long you've been on those pills. In fact, I'm sure if you take in over-the-counter medications, you're ingesting them as well, and, well, that used to be the situation, but now with the graphene, the superconductor graphene, moving in and being put in the food supply, we're ingesting this stuff, we're breathing this stuff, people who do drugs are injecting it directly into their veins and their brains, and it's programmable matter. These little antennas pick up a certain frequency and they start to oscillate and they become electrified, and that all makes them become magnetic. They become electric and magnetic, And what do you know about metal filings? When you put a magnet in their area, like they're on a table, you put a magnet under it so they line up along the lines of force. They align themselves. And the same thing happens inside of our bodies. We breathe these things in. They clog up our joints and give you arthritis and gout. They fill your hair, follicles, and when the story about how you get white and gray hair because of the pigment stopping, because the pigment cell is getting old and not working. Yeah, that sounds like a load of bullshit to me. It turns white or it stops working because it's so overloaded with white metal particles that your immune system doesn't know what to do with, that it starts to turn your hair white or silver or blue, depending on your mixture of metals and what your body can take out and what it can't. And everybody's slightly different, so but basically the same. There's a white hair epidemic going on. I grew up spanning the last 5 decades, and I remember being a kid in the 70s well enough, and the 80s for that matter, that there were old people that had white or gray hair, sometimes blue hair, usually old ladies, but they were old. They were 75, 80, 90. They weren't in their 30s with white hair. That was unfucking heard of. My grandpa, I remember him, he must have been, I think, 50, almost a little older than I am now. He must have been like 56. And and I was little, but I remember looking at him when we were at my grandma's house one time, just like watching him when I was sitting there on the couch, and he had a little bit of white right here, like just a tiny bit of white on, not in his beard, not in his hair, just a little bit right there at 56, and I remember that pretty well. And I kind of remember that there were old people, but the people that had white and gray hair and silver hair weren't 50. They were 65, 70, 80. I knew two of my great grandparents and a great aunt. They were old when I was little, but I remember them in Carson, Washington. Uh, they had gray hair, but that seemed normal because they were older than the hills. Great Grandma Beeks and Aunt Ina, Dawn and Ina, and Grandma Vi. Anyway, white hair epidemic is metals. Your immune system can't know what to do with that crap. It starts putting it everywhere and is non-vital, which means push it to the outside. And even that doesn't work at a certain point. And it fills up the inside, and the associated diminished immune system and complicates the fungus and parasite issues that people might have, and so they become susceptible to all these things real easily, and you end up with this infected condition in the plasma under your skin in which these particles align. Bacteria is in there, and staph is in there, and all kinds of crap is in there, right? Staph, that's a strange word for an infection. The staph is in there, and it coordinates everything. No, the high frequency modulated microwaves, let's say. This is just my fictional story I'm making up here. None of this is really happening, in the real world. I'm just making up a story. What if the same technology is used to grow silicon ingots and then make the wafers into computer chips, which, we pretty much know is a real thing because you're watching this on a computer that seems to work. So if they can build structures and create things using magnetic and electrical resonance and frequencies, generators or transmitters, and they're putting up these giant frequency transmitters all over town and every 180 feet in all directions, and all Wi-Fi's and all cell phones and all that, and the purple LED lights that are light, computer connected AI shit. Well, What if those things were used to manipulate resonance points? And what if what we were breathing in this fictional story was antennas and not just some poisonous, toxin? We want to make everybody sick, so we're going to spray you with this toxin. No, 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 no. That would be mundane and stupid and simple. I mean, it would, that is essentially on a certain level what's happening, but it's more than just a toxin. It's a toxin that can be interacted with by radio signals, microwave signals, ULF for all I know. Probably not ULF because those are long wavelengths, but the millimeter waves, definitely. On the millimeter waves, they're there's talk of them reversing the spin on the water molecules, and it keeps your body from being able to absorb the moisture from the water you drink, and so you could literally dehydrate while you're drinking water and shit. I'm not totally hip on that, so I got nothing to say on it other than I heard about it. I do know that when I'm in a area when the airplanes are flying over, or if I'm near a power substation, or just it's the right time of the day and the moon is in the right phase, I literally feel on my skin, and I can look at my skin, the texture changes, the hairs change, if there's any left there, that is, and I feel like my veins will bulge up, the lumps will appear on the side of my head, and I'll just look in the mirror and like, oh yeah, they're there, and I'll go like this, and there'll be a big poof of smoke, and then it will alleviate the swelling and the itchiness and the creepy crawly skin sensation. Now it seems sketchy, I know, and dangerous, but the truth is I haven't burnt myself once, because I know that I'll flinch away before anything actually hurts me in any serious way, as long as I'm not stupid and like fall onto a lighter or a fucking torch or something. And this is actually the most controllable steady flame. Even a candle is not this steady. Like the distance, once you get the distance down, there's no way you're gonna burn yourself. But it takes a little bit of nerves to do my fire yoga. But hey, if you want to purify the temple, you have to use fire. So let me get all yogi. Get my yogi hat. Okay, yogi. Hey, boo boo. How about you hand me that torch over there? This bear rug is getting